What if a single
Oh
erased
my
photograph could shape the
God.
very core of the British royal family? Late one night, behind hospital walls meant to protect privacy, a royal guard discovered something that was never meant to be found. Images quietly deleted, records quietly altered, and a truth quietly buried. When that guard finally spoke, Prince William didn't hesitate. He confronted Camilla with evidence so precise, so damning, it left the room frozen in silence. The question isn't what was erased. If you're drawn to the real stories hiding behind palace walls, the ones filled with quiet courage, difficult truths, and human emotion, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves royal stories that go deeper than headlines. Your support helps these powerful stories reach the people who truly appreciate them. The guard had stood outside hospital rooms before. Many times, actually. Royal births, emergency visits, moments the public never saw and never would. This night was supposed to be no different. Quiet corridors, soft lighting, the smell of disinfectant mixed with tension. But something felt off. Sergeant Thomas Hale had served the crown for over 20 years. He had guarded heads of state, walked behind coffins, and stood still for hours while history unfolded inches away from him. Experience taught him one thing above all else. When something feels wrong, it usually is. The private wing of the hospital had been locked down tighter than usual. Phones confiscated, cameras banned. Even senior staff were being rotated out without explanation. Officially, it was about privacy. Unofficially, no one would say. Hale stood near the nurse's station, eyes forward, posture firm. He wasn't meant to listen. Guards never were. But silence has a way of amplifying things. A nurse whispered to another, her voice shaking just enough to notice. Those images should still be there. The other nurse froze. They're not. I checked twice. Images.Hal didn't move, didn't react, but his mind sharpened. Later, during a routine shift change, he was asked to escort a hospital IT technician into a secure room. That alone raised an eyebrow. IT never came in person unless something serious had happened. Inside the room sat a terminal, a medical imaging station. The technician's hands trembled as he typed. System glitch? Hale asked casually. The man swallowed. No, sir. Deletion. That word landed heavy. What kind of deletion? The technician hesitated, then lowered his voice. Manual. Authorized override. Hale watched the screen. File logs scrolled past. Timestamps. Access codes. Names blurred out with red blocks. Is that normal? Hale asked. The technician laughed nervously. In 20 years? No. The images in question are hospital photos, routine documentation, the kind taken for records, accountability, and safety. They weren't scandalous. They weren't graphic. But they were gone. Every copy. Every backup dot. Someone hadn't just deleted files. They'd erased a story. Hale finished his shift hours later, but sleep never came. His training told him to forget what he'd seen. His conscience told him the opposite. Royal service was built on loyalty, silence, discretion, but it was also built on duty. And duty didn't always mean obedience. The next morning, Hale requested access to archived security logs, something he technically had clearance for, though few ever used it without orders. He framed it as routine. No one questioned him. That, too, bothered him. The logs told a quiet but devastating tale. Access requests made after midnight. Credentials that shouldn't have been active. A temporary authorization code tied not to medical leadership, but to a private royal office liaison. That wasn't standard procedure. Hale leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. This wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. Over the next 2 days, Hale watched carefully, listened more than he spoke. He noticed staff being reassigned abruptly. A senior consultant removed from rotation without explanation. A nurse quietly sent home early. eyes red as if she'd been crying. And always, always, the same unspoken tension. Something had happened in that hospital room. Something important enough to trigger a cleanup. The question was simple and dangerous. On the third night, Hale made a decision that would change everything. He copied the access logs, not to share, not yet, just to preserve. A guard doesn't investigate. A guard observes, records, waits. But fate has a way of accelerating things.
Just an invitation that felt more like a summons. Hale arrived at Kensington under gray skies. Inside, the palace felt different than usual, less ceremonial, more human. Staff moved quietly. Conversation stopped when doors opened. He was escorted into a modest sitting room, far from cameras or grandeur. Prince William stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't turn immediately. Sergeant Hale, William said at last, "How long have you served?" 22 years, sir." William nodded slowly. Long enough to know when something isn't right. Hale said nothing. William turned to face him then. His expression wasn't angry. It was controlled, focused, but beneath it, something else. Concern. "You were on duty during the hospital incident," William said. "Yes, sir." "And you noticed irregularities." That wasn't a question. Hale hesitated for half a second, then reached into his jacket and placed a sealed envelope on the table. "I noticed deletions that didn't follow protocol," Hale said carefully, "and authorization paths that don't align with standard procedure." William didn't touch the envelope right away. "Why bring this to me?" he asked. Hale met his gaze. "Because someone wanted those images gone. Completely. And whoever was had access most people shouldn't." Silence stretched between them. William finally picked up the envelope. His jaw tightened as he scanned the documents inside. Access logs, timestamps, redacted names. When he finished, he looked up. "Did anyone instruct you to gather this?" "No, sir." "Did anyone tell you to forget what you saw?" Hale paused. "Not directly." William nodded, as if that confirmed something he already suspected. "You understand what this implies," William said quietly. "Yes, sir." "And you understand the cost of speaking up." Hale straightened. "I swore to protect the crown. That includes its future." For a brief moment, William's composure cracked. Just a little. "Thank you," he said, "for not looking away." As Hale was escorted out, he didn't feel relief. He felt the weight of what came next. Because once truth enters a room, it doesn't leave quietly. And somewhere else, behind palace walls thicker than stone, someone would soon realize that the past they tried to erase had just found its way back. The photos were never meant to disappear. That was the first thing Sergeant Thomas Hale understood when he reviewed the system logs again, alone, long after his official shift had ended. Hospitals did not simply lose records, especially not in the private wing reserved for the royal family. Every scan, every image, every data point was duplicated, archived, and protected by layers of policy designed to prevent exactly this kind of disappearance. And yet, the images were gone, not corrupted, not misplaced, erased. The deeper Hale looked, the clearer the pattern became. The deletions hadn't happened all at once. They were staggered, methodical, executed over several hours, as if whoever was responsible wanted to be absolutely certain no trace remained. It wasn't panic. It was planning. The images themselves had been routine hospital photographs, taken as part of standard documentation during a late-night medical visit involving a senior royal. Nothing dramatic at first glance. No scandal that would have shattered headlines if leaked. But Hale knew something most people didn't. Context mattered. Hospital photos weren't just pictures. They were timestamps, proof of who was present, who authorized what, who entered and exited restricted rooms. They told a story far beyond what appeared in the frame. And someone had decided that story was dangerous. The first red flag appeared in the access hierarchy. Normally, deletions of that level require dual authorization, one from hospital administration, one from Royal Security Medical Oversight. That system existed to prevent abuse. That night, the protocol had been bypassed. A temporary override had been granted, valid for only 6 hours. Just long enough. Hale traced the override to a liaison office embedded deep within royal operations, not public-facing, not accountable to Parliament, an office that existed to smooth complications before they ever surfaced. That phrase echoed in his mind. Smooth complications. Hale spoke quietly with a senior nurse he trusted, someone who had worked royal cases for years and knew when to keep her voice low. They told us the images were no longer needed, she said, eyes fixed on the floor. Said it came from above. Above where? Hale asked. She shook her head. They didn't say. And no one asked. That was the second red flag. In institutions like this, silence wasn't accidental. It was taught. The nurse hesitated, then added, They also told us not to discuss who was in the room that night. Hale's jaw tightened. Was anyone unusual present? Her lips parted slightly, then closed. That answer was enough. Over the next 24 hours, Hale noticed subtle but telling movements. Cleaning staff rotated unexpectedly. A junior administrator reassigned. A security camera in one corridor taken offline for maintenance, conveniently covering the path between the imaging suite and a private exit. Someone was tidying up. The third red flag came when Hale attempted to retrieve backup data from an off-site server. The request was denied automatically. That should have been impossible. Backup servers were sacrosanct, untouchable without multi-level clearance and a documented cause. The denial message was polite, generic, but attached was a digital signature Hale had only seen a handful of times in his career. Private authorization. That was when the unease turned into something colder. Fear, not for himself, but for the institution he had sworn to protect. Because if records could be erased as cleanly, then truth itself had become negotiable. Late that night, Hale sat alone in the security office, staring at the blinking cursor on the terminal. Training told him to step back, to wait for orders, to let hierarchy handle it. But experience whispered something else. If he waited, there would be nothing left to find. So he acted. He copied the logs, not the images which were already gone, but the absence of them. Access paths, authorization chains, timestamps, metadata shadows where files once lived, digital ghosts. It was risky. If discovered, it could end his career. But some moments demanded a decision that couldn't be undone. As he finished encrypting the files, Hale heard footsteps in the corridor. Calm, unhurried. A senior palace official appeared at the doorway, smiling thinly. Working late, Sergeant? Routine review, Hale replied evenly. The official nodded. Good. These situations require discretion. Hale met his gaze. They require accuracy. The smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. Be careful, the man said. Accuracy can be misinterpreted. When he left, Hale exhaled slowly. That was the fourth red flag. Warnings didn't come unless someone felt threatened. By morning, rumors had begun circulating quietly among staff. Not specifics, never specifics, but the sense that something had happened that must not be repeated, discussed, or remembered. One young orderly whispered to another, They said it's being handled. Handled. Hale hated that word, because handled usually meant buried. Later that day, Hale learned that a junior doctor had attempted to file a routine follow-up report and had been instructed to rewrite it. Nothing false, just lighter, less precise, details softened, edges rounded. The truth wasn't being denied. It was being diluted. That was perhaps the most dangerous tactic of all. Hale understood then that the erased photos were only the beginning. They were the most obvious piece, but not the only one. Conversations had been redirected, records adjusted. Memory itself was being shaped, and it was working. People were already doubting what they'd seen, convincing themselves it hadn't mattered. That was when Hale realized the real risk. Not exposure. Forgetting. By the time Prince William requested a private briefing days later, Hale had prepared himself. Not emotionally, no one could truly prepare for that, but professionally, he brought facts, not theories, not accusations, just evidence of absence. As he walked toward Kensington Palace, Hale felt the weight of it settle in his chest. He wasn't bringing scandal. He wasn't challenging authority. He was carrying a truth that refused to stay erased. And somewhere beyond hospital corridors and palace walls, the consequences of that choice were already unfolding. Because once something is deliberately removed, the question is never what vanished. It's who wanted it gone. And more importantly, what were they afraid would be seen? But fate has a way of accelerating things. The following afternoon, Hale was summoned, not by his commanding officer, but by a private secretary from Kensington Palace. The request was polite. Calm. Too calm. Prince William would like a word, she said. That was all. No explanation. No context. Just an invitation that felt more like a summons. Hale arrived at Kensington under gray skies. Inside, the palace felt different than usual. Less ceremonial. More human. Staff moved quietly. Conversation stopped when doors opened. He was escorted into a modest sitting room, far from cameras or grandeur. Prince William stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't turn immediately. Sergeant Hale, William said at last, "How long have you served?" 22 years, sir." William nodded slowly. Long enough to know when something isn't right. Hale said nothing. William turned to face him then. His expression wasn't angry. It was controlled, focused, but beneath it, something else. Concern. "You were on duty during the hospital incident," William said. "Yes, sir." "And you noticed irregularities." That wasn't a question. Hale hesitated for half a second, then reached into his jacket and placed a sealed envelope on the table. "I noticed deletions that didn't follow protocol," Hale said carefully, "and authorization pads that don't align with standard procedure." William didn't touch the envelope right away. "Why bring this to me?" he asked. Hale met his gaze. "Because someone wanted those images gone. Completely. And whoever was had access most people shouldn't." Silence stretched between them. William finally picked up the envelope. His jaw tightened as he scanned the documents inside. Access logs, timestamps, redacted names. When he finished, he looked up. "Did anyone instruct you to gather this?" "No, sir." "Did anyone tell you to forget what you saw?" Hale paused. "Not directly." William nodded, as if that confirmed something he already suspected. "You understand what this implies," William said quietly. "Yes, sir." "And you understand the cost of speaking up." Hale straightened. "I swore to protect the crown. That includes its future." For a brief moment, William's composure cracked. Just a little. "Thank you," he said, "for not looking away." As Hale was escorted out, he didn't feel relief. He felt the weight of what came next. Because once truth enters a room, it doesn't leave quietly. And somewhere else, behind palace walls thicker than stone, someone would soon realize that the past they tried to erase had just found its way back. Prince William did not sleep that night. The envelope Sergeant Hale had placed on the table sat unopened for hours after the guard left. Not because William feared what was inside, but because he already sensed it would confirm something he'd tried, for a long time, not to name. Royal life trained you early to live with unanswered questions. You learned which ones to ask out loud and which ones to leave untouched. This one refused to stay buried. When William finally opened the file again, he didn't rush. He read every line, every timestamp, every gap where something should have existed but didn't. Deleted medical images, overwritten hospital protocols, authorization codes routed through a private liaison office that reported upward, but not to him. That detail mattered. William wasn't naive. He understood power, understood how influence moved quietly, without signatures or press releases. But this wasn't politics. This wasn't damage control after a bad headline. This was a hospital. And someone had decided the truth inside those walls was too dangerous to remain. At dawn, William made a decision. No committees, no advisors, no palace lawyers. He requested a private meeting with Camilla. No staff present, no record log beyond family discussion. The room chosen was small by palace standards. A sitting room used more for personal conversations than official ones. Soft chairs, neutral colors, windows looking out over a garden that had seen decades of secrets pass beneath it. Camilla arrived composed, as always, calm smile, relaxed posture, the confidence of someone who had survived long enough in royal life to know when storms passed. "William," she said warmly, "you sounded serious." He gestured for her to sit. He remained standing. "Do you recognize these?" he asked, placing copies of the logs on the table. Camilla glanced down briefly, too briefly. Her smile didn't fade, but something behind her eyes shifted. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," she said lightly. William leaned forward, resting his hands on the chair back opposite her. "These are hospital access logs. From the night certain images were erased. Images tied to a private medical incident involving the family." Camilla sighed softly. "Hospitals deal with sensitive matters all the time. Surely you know how careful one must be." "Careful is one thing," William replied. "Erasure is another." The air changed. Camilla straightened slightly. "You're implying intent." "I'm stating fact," William said. "These deletions required authorization that routes through an office connected to you." That landed. Camilla looked at the papers again, this time longer. Her fingers tapped once on the armrest. "You're treading dangerously close to accusation," she said. William's voice remained calm. That was the most unsettling part. "I'm treading toward clarity." A pause. Outside, a bird startled from the garden hedge. The sound felt oddly loud. Camilla set the papers down carefully. "You have to understand," she began, "that not everything is meant to be preserved. Some truths cause harm simply by existing." William tilted his head slightly. "Harm to whom?" "To the institution," she said without hesitation. "To stability. To people who never asked to be dragged into speculation. Or to individuals who don't want questions asked," William countered. Camilla met his gaze. For the first time, the warmth slipped. "You think this is about protecting me," she said. "It's not." "Then explain it," William said. "Explain why hospital records were wiped clean. Explain why staff were reassigned. Explain why a royal guard felt compelled to preserve logs before they vanished too." That last line hung heavy. Camilla's jaw tightened. Guards should not take it upon themselves to interpret matters above their station. William didn't flinch. Guards protect. That's their station. Another silence. Then Camilla spoke more quietly. "You don't see the full picture. Then show it to me." She hesitated. That hesitation told William more than words ever could. "What was in those photos?" he asked. Camilla's eyes flicked toward the window. Something that would have been misinterpreted. "By whom?" "By everyone," she snapped, then caught herself. She exhaled slowly. "William, the public doesn't understand nuance. They see fragments and build monsters. And so the solution was to erase evidence." William asked, "To pretend reality didn't happen?" "It was about preventing unnecessary damage." "To whom?" he asked again more firmly. Camilla didn't answer. William straightened. "I'm not asking as an adversary. I'm asking as someone who will one day inherit the consequences of these decisions." Her voice softened. "You will also inherit the responsibility to protect the crown." "Yes," William said, "but not by hollowing out from the inside." That struck something. Camilla stood abruptly, pacing a few steps before stopping near the fireplace. "You think transparency is strength," she said. "Sometimes it's exposure, and exposure destroys." William took a breath. What destroys is the truth surfacing later, without context, without integrity. She turned back to him. "You're idealistic." "Maybe," he said, "but I won't build a future on erased records and frightened staff." The room felt suddenly smaller. Camilla studied him, as if seeing not the boy she'd known, but the man he'd become. "You intend to pursue this," she said. "I intend to ensure it never happens again," William replied, "and that those involved understand the boundaries." Her eyes narrowed. "Including me?" William held her gaze. "Including anyone." A long pause followed. Not angry, not explosive, measured. Camilla finally nodded once. "You've made your position clear." "So have you," William said. As the meeting ended, There were no raised voices, no dramatic exits, just two people walking out separate doors, each understanding something fundamental had shifted. William returned to his office and placed the logs in a secure file. Not leaked, not weaponized, preserved, because leadership, he believed, wasn't about controlling the story. It was about being strong enough to face it. And somewhere deep within palace corridors, the ripple had begun. The guard had spoken. The truth had been acknowledged. And silence, carefully constructed for years, was starting to crack. The truth did not explode. It settled. That was the strange thing about it. After everything, the erased photos, the quiet confrontations, the structural changes, there was no dramatic reckoning for the world to watch. No statement. No apology framed in careful language. No single moment where history announced it had turned a corner. Instead, the truth became heavier with time. Prince William felt it in the stillness of his days, in the way people paused before answering him now, in how senior figures chose their words with greater care, as if aware that silence was no longer a shield but a risk. Power had shifted, not upward or downward, but inward. William understood something then that no briefing had ever taught him. Leadership was not about commanding loyalty. It was about earning trust from those who would never appear in photographs. Like Sergeant Hale. Hale continued his duties quietly. He did not become a symbol. He was not promoted publicly, nor moved aside. That alone was unusual. In royal service, people who disrupted delicate balances were often reassigned for their own good. Hale stayed. That decision had come from William directly, because removing him would have sent the wrong message. That truth-telling carried consequences. Keeping him sent another. Still, the cost was real. Hale noticed it in conversations that ended too quickly, in glances that lingered just a second longer than before. Loyalty in the palace had layers, and once you peeled one back, you never saw people quite the same way again. He accepted that. Some nights. He wondered what would have happened if he looked away, if he trusted the system to correct itself. But then he remembered the nurse's voice, the trembling hands of the IT technician, the way reality had nearly been rewritten simply because it was inconvenient. And he slept. William, meanwhile, faced a different burden. The confrontation with Camilla had not been revisited. Not directly, but it echoed in every interaction. Polite exchanges carried an undercurrent of distance. Mutual understanding replaced warmth. No one spoke of blame. They spoke of restraint. Camilla adjusted her role subtly. Less involvement in operational decisions. Fewer informal channels. She remained visible, respected. But her influence now moved through narrower corridors. It was not punishment. It was containment. And that distinction mattered. William never framed it as a victory. In private moments, he questioned himself. Had he gone far enough? Too far? Had he protected the institution or fractured it? Then one afternoon, an unexpected letter arrived. It was handwritten, brief, from a hospital consultant who had been present that night. I don't know if you remember me. It began, but I wanted you to know that what you did mattered. People like me don't usually get to believe that integrity survives proximity to power. You proved otherwise. William read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the same notebook where he recorded moments that mattered. There was another line added beneath the first. Silence protects power. Truth protects people. Months passed. The public never learned what almost vanished. They went on with their lives, arguing over headlines and ceremonies, unaware of the quiet line that had been drawn behind palace walls. And that was fine. Some victories were not meant for applause. Years later, long after William would take on even greater responsibility, historians would note a subtle change in royal operations, increased transparency, independent oversight, fewer unexplained absences in records. They would attribute it to modernization. They would be partially right, but they would never know about the night when images disappeared, and one man chose to preserve their absence instead. They would never know about the conversation in a small sitting room where power met principle and blinked. And they would never know how close the truth came to being lost, not to time, but to choice. One evening, long after the matter had faded into institutional memory, William stood again in the garden. The same hedges, the same quiet air. He thought about legacy, not the one etched in stone, but the one carried in systems, in habits, in the courage of those who came after. A future guard would one day face a similar moment, a similar decision, and because it would have been done here, quietly, firmly, that guard would find fewer doors closed, fewer truths erased. That, William believed, was how real change happened, not through spectacle, through structure. As for Hale, he retired years later with no public commendations, just a simple farewell, firm handshakes, and quiet respect. On his last day, William met him privately. "You once told me you served to protect the future," William said. Hale nodded. "I still believe that." William extended his hand again. "You did." As Hale walked away from the palace for the final time, he did not look back. Some places were not meant to be revisited once their purpose was fulfilled. Inside, the palace remained. Old stone, old traditions, new boundaries. The truth had not torn it apart. It had strengthened it. Because power that fears the truth is fragile, and power that can face it, endure it, preserve it, endures. Final thought. In the end, the most dangerous secret wasn't what had been erased. It was a belief that erasing it would make it disappear. And thanks to one guard, one choice, and one future king who refused to look away, it didn't.